I don't usually talk about this night, not because it's hard to recall. The opposite, actually. But because anytime I bring it up, it feels like I'm inviting it back. Like I'm letting whatever it was catch my scent again. But this happened in 2015, in a remote part of Upper Michigan. And to this day, no one else really believes me. So here it is. I was 22 and in the middle of one of those rocky early adult patches. You know the kind. Every plan I had post-college fell apart before graduation even rolled around. Instead of moving to Chicago like I dreamed, I stayed in state, part-timing between two dead-end jobs, sharing a bad apartment with worse roommates. My cousin offered me the cabin as a break. She knew a friend who owned a place way out, her words, where people barely had cell towers and no neighbors for miles. She figured a few quiet nights alone might do me good. No distraction. Air that didn't smell like bus exhaust. Maybe even think things through. I packed 2 duffels and my laptop, bought instant coffee and beer, and drove 5 hours north to a place marked on the GPS only as Mill River Trailhead, which, by the way, doesn't exist on normal maps. I had to print out directions like it was 2003, with arrows and road names scribbled in ink. The dirt road leading to the cabin was the kind where every rock jarred your spine. It twisted through thick old-growth forest that pressed up against your windows like it wanted to swallow the car whole. The only sign of the cabin was a rusted mailbox with the number 27 carved into the wood and a dirt pullover that hadn't seen tire tracks in weeks. But the cabin was beautiful. A-frame roof, cedar siding faded into gray, set back just enough in the trees to feel private but not claustrophobic. The kind of place you could imagine writing a novel or slowly losing your mind. Inside smelled like pine and mothballs. Old furniture, but clean sheets. A bookshelf stocked with dog-eared paperbacks. A fireplace already prepared with fresh logs. By sundown, I had a meal on the stove and a playlist echoing through the one Bluetooth speaker I brought. I even started to feel like maybe things would be fine. Maybe I needed this. A break from the noise. It wasn't until around 11 p.m., after I killed the lights and stretched out on the couch with a beer, that I noticed something strange. A scraping sound. Not loud, just subtle, like leathery fingers brushing against bark. I sat up and looked at the front window. Nothing. I told myself it was the wind. I even laughed a little. My mind goes down rabbit holes when it gets quiet. Always has. But less than 30 minutes later, the air in the cabin changed. That's the only way to describe it. It felt thicker, too still. You know that feeling when the house goes quiet right before a storm? It was like that, but heavier. Like something was holding its breath nearby. Then came the tapping. It came from the back window. Small, sharp taps. Like a single fingernail, followed by another. I froze. I remembered hearing somewhere that animals knock stuff over. They don't tap. Tap means intention. I turned off my music and stood quietly. inching toward the back of the cabin without turning on lights. The tapping stopped. I crouched below the windowsill and slowly peeked over the edge. There was something standing at the tree line. Tall, pale, almost strong, too tall maybe, completely still. I blinked and it wasn't gone, but it had shifted. A few feet to the right, it wasn't walking, just there again, like it cut the space between. I ducked back down and felt the cold punch of adrenaline hit my chest like a wave. I wanted to believe my eyes were off, that the shadows played tricks. But the tapping came again, this time on the side wall closer. I locked all doors, every window, closed the curtains and retreated to the far side of the cabin where my phone had barely a bar of service before. Of course, now there was nothing. No signal, no backup. I sat in the corner of the bedroom, clutching the useless phone, while my beer sweated on the floor beside me. All lights off, all sound gone. The only thing I could hear was my own ragged breathing. Then something creaked. Floorboards. Inside. I swear to you, something stepped through the main room of the cabin. Deliberate. 1 foot, then the next. Wood groaning under weight that wasn't mine. And I swear I heard breathing. Slow, wet, guttural breath. It stopped outside the bedroom door. For nearly 10 minutes, I didn't move. Just sat there, unable to think. Then, knock, knock. 2 taps on the door. I couldn't respond. I think my heart literally skipped. And then, silence. Eventually, maybe an hour later, the quiet returned. I never heard it leave. I still don't know how it got in, or if it really ever did. I stayed in that spot until sunlight cracked through the fabric curtains. And when I finally stepped out into the living room, dragging the poker from the fireplace, like that'd do anything, it was empty. But there was something on the windowsill. A single, large handprint, smudged across the condensation. Not human. I left that morning without packing. I drove 5 straight hours home, heart racing the entire way. To this day, I haven't gone back. I never even told my cousin what happened, because there's something out there in those woods, something that watches the ones who are alone. And that night, it watched me. I didn't believe in the supernatural until my first year as a delivery driver. Not the kind who drives around cities or suburbs. I worked for a private courier service, mostly contracted to transport legal documents and urgent parcels to remote locations in the Pacific Northwest. That summer, I was assigned to drop a small sealed container to a biologist stationed at a wildlife monitoring cabin off the Cascade Trails. The road ended about 4 miles from the cabin itself, and the rest I had to hike. It was mid-July, around 4 p.m. when I reached the trailhead. Thick trees lined the gravel path, and though the sun was still up, the woods cast a shadow over everything. It felt older there somehow, like I had stepped off the edge of something modern and into a place time forgot. I locked my vehicle, grabbed the package from the cool seat, and started down the trail. On the paperwork was a note. Do not attempt delivery after dark. If arrival is late, hold delivery and return at dawn. Cabin requires in-person signature. That detail stuck with me. I'd done plenty of remote deliveries and I'd never seen anything like that on a slip before. But I timed it right, so I pushed the warnings aside like most people would. The hike wasn't difficult, though the air grew heavier the farther I walked, deeper, hollow in a sense. The wind didn't feel normal. It shifted suddenly, hot, then cold, then calm, and then completely still. Not a single bird call, not a flutter of movement on the ground, just silence. It made the hairs on the back of my neck twitch. About 2 miles in, I started getting the distinct impression of being watched. At first, it was that faint paranoia anyone would feel in the middle of nowhere. But then, it morphed into something stronger. Like there was intention behind it. Not just a wandering deer or fox, but focused awareness. At the 3 mile mark, I saw movement. Just ahead, something stepped behind a tree. Tall, thin, the color of damp stone. I froze and called out, "Hey, I'm just making a delivery." No response, no movement. I walked slower. At exactly 4 miles, the trail opened into a clearing no wider than a basketball court. In the far right corner sat the cabin. Elevated slightly on wooden stilts, with a wraparound porch and a wind chime that remained completely still. I stepped closer and noticed the door was open a crack. No lights inside. Shadows stretched through the inside like fingers. I knocked twice, unsure if anyone even still lived there. "Delivery," I called out. "Need a signature." Silence. I stepped onto the deck and noticed blood. Not a pool, just spots, dragged across the bottom of the door in a finger-width smear. I backed up immediately, instincts kicking in. And just as I turned to leave, the door creaked wider. Someone, or something, was inside. I could hear movement, not footsteps, shifting weight, heavy, slow. My gut told me to run, but my legs didn't respond. Then something stepped into the doorway. It was a man, I think, but he didn't look right. His face was blank, like glass smudged with ash. Eyes too far apart. A mouth that hung slightly open, but didn't move. He raised a hand, slow and robotic, and pointed at me. That's when I realized. His feet weren't touching the floor. He was hovering, an inch or two above the wooden planks, and I could hear nothing. Not a creak, not breathing, not even the wind. I stumbled backward down the porch steps and hit the dirt hard. My elbow scraped open, but I didn't even feel it. I scrambled to my feet and bolted. The trail behind me had changed. The markers were gone. I swear to you. 3 orange ribbons had been tied to mark my route. Now they were missing. I turned in slow circles, trying to retrace my steps, but every tree looked the same. I didn't stop to think. I turned and ran. Branches slapping my arms, careless of the direction. I could hear something behind me. Not footsteps, dragging sounds, like something tall scraping through the trees above. And worse than the sound was the feeling. A pulse in the air that matched the beat of my heart, like something was sinking itself to me. Eventually, I hit the gravel path again. I ran until I could see the shimmer of my car's windshield through the trees and didn't stop. The sun hadn't set yet, but the clouds had thickened and rolled in. making everything dim and gray. I locked the doors and didn't breathe until I was 2 miles back down the mountain road. That night, I checked my delivery manifest. The destination was no longer listed in the system. I contacted my dispatcher with a made-up excuse about time delays, asked if I could try again in the morning. He said he didn't know what I was talking about. No cabin, no work order under that code, no biologist assigned to that location. I still had the package. It's under lock and key now, in a military-grade case I bought at a resale lot. It's small, smaller than I remember, and ice cold no matter the weather. I haven't dared open it. I don't recognize the symbols on the seal, and I can't translate the label. Google gives me nothing. But sometimes, I swear I can hear a faint humming from inside, like something breathing, waiting. And every time I hike now, even just on normal public forest trails, I see movements too fast to follow, just past the edge of the trees. When I was 15, my uncle nearly died inside a cabin in rural Tennessee. He wasn't supposed to tell anyone what really happened that weekend. But after the stroke, something changed in him. His mouth didn't work right anymore, and speaking was slow and broken. But over time, I got the pieces, and putting them together made me realize why he never went near the woods again. My Uncle Roy was known in our family as the outdoorsman, the survivalist. Grew up skinning deer, taught us how to gut fish with bare hands. He liked being alone too much, never married, barely kept a landline, routinely disappeared for weeks without telling anyone where he was going. But we always knew it meant he'd gone to his place. That's what he called it. My place, up in the high woods. I only saw it once when I was a kid. The road leading up was packed red clay and crop-choked ditches, no signs, no markers. Just a narrow gash in the trees that wound up into the hills. I remember the front of the cabin being almost hidden under moss. The porch had no railings, just a wood bench and a single bulb above a door that never sat straight in the frame. When Roy had his episode, he was 61, slim, still strong, but slower than he used to be. It happened right there at the cabin. He was alone for 3.5 days on the floor before a local grocer noticed he hadn't come into town when expected and called the sheriff. After the hospital stabilized him, he couldn't move much. But the look in his eyes, that wild, paranoid flicker, never went away. It got worse at night. Nurses said he thrashed in his sleep and woke up screaming things like, "Don't let it talk," or "I didn't open the door." At first, they thought it was fever delirium. But I stayed with him for a few days during rehab. He hated the doctors, didn't trust his own brother, but me. He said I listened, even if it took him 5 full minutes to form a single sentence. It took weeks, but he told me what he saw. He said something came to the cabin, not someone. Something. He described it as wearing someone's face, like clothes. Said it knocked 3 times, slow, spaced out, just after midnight. He'd been asleep in his cot when the first knock came. It was winter, and snow had choked the chimney. So the place was deathly quiet, not even wind or creaks. He ignored it at first, pretended he was still dreaming. But then came a second knock, slower. Then a third. He got up, loaded his 30-30 and peeked out the window, expecting coyotes or maybe a neighbor who'd gotten lost. But no one was there. He backed away and waited. Then came a fourth knock, but not on the door. It came from the inside wall, just behind his head. He told me. It looked like the shape of a neighbor, the voice of a child, the smile of neither. It stepped halfway out of the darkness beside the fireplace. Not through the door, not from any entryway, just appeared. Its arms were too long for its body, and it bent wrong at the knees, backwards, like an elk's, but it had skin. His voice cracked when he said that. It had skin. It wore it like a coat. He pulled the trigger and he saw daylight through the thing's stomach. No blood. It should have dropped, but it just stared at him, cocked its head and said, "You invited me. You're alone. You asked." Then it smiled wider than anything human could. He ran, or tried to. But somewhere between the door and the porch, his body collapsed. That's when the stroke hit. He said the thing stayed there, hovering just inside the doorway for hours, never stepping out, never speaking again, just watching, even as the sun rose and the cold faded. The last thing he said before the nurses came in was this: "If something ever knocks and it already knows your name, don't answer, not even in your thoughts." After he died 9 months later, I went up there myself, searched the cabin. Everything looked normal at first. Same sagging beams, same crooked firewood pile. But behind the fireplace, hidden between the wall and the wood frame, I found something. It was a single slip of paper, handwritten in pencil. Damp, smudged. It said only, "He came to me wearing her voice." And right beneath it was a child's drawing. Crude, craned, probably old. It showed a man standing in front of a black cabin, arms raised. And behind him was something else, twice as tall, with too many arms, and a face that looked like a little girl's. This happened during the pandemic. When the world shut down, my friends and I decided we'd escape the madness by isolating together. There were 5 of us, all old college roommates, and we found a cheap rental deep in the Vermont woods, 4 hours from anything that smelled like a city. The cabin was beautiful, in a rustic, doesn't have Wi-Fi kind of way. It had 3 bedrooms, a fire pit, and a gravel path that led down to a faded dock, resting on the edge of a black, silent lake. It hadn't been booked in years, and the owner gave us a huge discount, as long as we promised to leave it how we found it. We should have known that was a red flag. When we got there, things were normal, quiet, a little creepy, but nothing alarming. The road was gravel and spiderwebbed with tree roots. The kitchen still had an ice tray, with cubes already frozen. A couple beer bottles in the garbage too. like the last guests left in a hurry. Our first 2 nights were great. Board games, bonfires, late night talks about how weird the world had become. But on the third night, something changed. John was the first to mention it. Said he woke up around 3 a.m. and felt something pressing against the fabric of the room. Not physically, but emotionally. Like the corners had darkened. Like the room wasn't as empty as it looked. We shrugged it off as a night terror. Then, the next night, Molly swore she heard something under the floorboards. She said it wasn't rats or raccoons. It sounded like something crawling, slow, slithering Lithuan. That same night, the motion sensor lights around the cabin started flickering. Only the ones facing the woods. Almost like someone kept stepping just barely into the light, then pulling back again. By the fifth night, no one was sleeping well. Every sound made our hearts jump. One evening, I stood out on the deck smoking, trying to calm myself down, when I noticed something. There were new footprints, bare feet, dozens of them, small and thin, scattered across the dirt right below the deck. At first, I thought they were animal tracks, but the shape was too human. Some looked like they'd been made by children. Others, long, bony, no toes, just impressions like splits or hooves. I called the others out to look, but the moment they stepped outside, the prints were gone, vanished in seconds. The soil hadn't even been disturbed. That was the first time I truly felt afraid. The next morning, we all agreed to leave early. Something was off about that place. John was convinced he saw something watching him through the trees the night before. A pale shape barely distinguishable from the trunks. We packed everything into our SUV and locked the cabin. Not one of us said a word. But when we pulled back onto the main road, the world had turned. I don't know how else to say it. The road we came in on, a single stretch of gravel lined by telephone poles and dense maple forest, was gone. Instead, the forest had moved. The trees closed in fast, too fast. At first, we assumed we turned wrong or took a different route. But after 30 minutes of circling back, we passed the same fallen tree we'd already cleared from the road earlier. Again. And then again. Every time we drove past it, it was in a slightly different spot. John slammed the brakes, muttering, "This isn't possible. It's a loop." Molly started crying. She kept saying she saw someone in the rearview mirror, walking toward us on the side of the road. But every time we looked back, there was no one. No one except branches, shaped vaguely like people, limbs that bent too sharp, clusters that looked like outstretched hands. Eventually, we drove until the tank hit empty. The car sputtered, died, and we sat there in total silence, floating in disbelief. No cell service, no GPS. Just a long droning hum coming from deep in the woods. It sounded industrial, almost mechanical, like gears turning in wet stone. Then we heard the knock from the trunk. 1, 2, 3. No one moved. Molly screamed. John fumbled for the folding knife in his pocket. I backed out of the passenger door and circled to the rear, my hands shaking so hard I dropped the keys twice, trying to unlock it. But when I opened the trunk, it was empty, except for a piece of paper taped to the inside. 3 words: "We see you." That was the last thing I remember clearly. The next memory is waking up in my own bed 2 days later. My phone said it was Wednesday. 2 full days gone. Text messages were normal. News looked the same, but I had no call logs or photos during that missing window. I thought maybe I passed out somewhere. Dreamed it all. Until John called. He asked if the scratches were still on my neck. I touched the back of my hairline, and sure enough, 3 long marks ran diagonally down my skin. Fresh red, like shallow claw wounds. Molly never called. She moved across the country last June without saying goodbye. I haven't seen any of them in almost a year. But last week I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a photo. Grainy, like it had been taken on an old trail cam. It showed the outside of that cabin. Same deck. Same sagging porch swing. And in the far corner of the photo, huddled just outside the ring of motion light, was a pale, distorted figure. No face, just the suggestion of one. The photo smelled like earth, wet leaves, and something else. Something that reminded me of that low hum the woods made. I threw the photo away, but I don't think it matters. Because some nights, when it's quiet enough, I can still hear footsteps on gravel just outside my window, and sometimes they stop right next to the wall. I work in real estate, have for about 12 years now, specializing in rural listings no one else wants to deal with. Long drives, overgrown properties, questionable ownership. That's where I come in. Easy profit if you're patient, but sometimes the stories you pick up watching over these places stick. This one came into my lap through an old buyer contact. Said there was a foreclosed cabin in northern Arizona that hadn't been accessed since 2001. 20 plus years. A trust fund dispute had left it in limbo until the final beneficiary died, and now it was just sitting, waiting to be cleared for market. I was told to check on its condition, photograph it, and make sure there were no squatters or hazards for future buyers. The cabin sat 13 miles outside a town called Aguila. Population under 800. You hit 2 different dirt roads, and then a washed-out service road that looked more like a dry creek bed than a proper path. I parked half a mile away and walked in on foot. It was the silence I noticed first. No wind, no birds, not even insects, just stillness. The kind that sets your nerves twitching without reason. The air smelled dead somehow, like dried leaves and closed spaces. The cabin itself looked surprisingly intact. Roof held up, windows unbroken, door still locked. I knocked anyway, out of habit, even called out. "Real estate agent? Just here to check on things, not trespassing?" No reply. I stepped inside. It was musty, stale, like a medicine cabinet that hadn't been opened in years. No signs of infestation, no vandalism, just old furniture, covered in plastic sheets and air heavy with dust. But the moment I crossed the threshold, I felt something off. It wasn't fear, not yet, just static. A faint pressure behind the eyes. I did a sweep the way I always do. Open doors, check closets, test light switches, flush the toilet, walk the perimeter. Everything functioned, but every creaking floorboard made me clench a little harder. Then I opened a door at the back of the hallway. It led to the basement. Pitch black. No windows anywhere. Just those steep wooden stairs that dropped into the unknown. My flashlight barely cut the darkness, like the light didn't want to travel in there. But duty's duty, so I made my way down slowly. The basement was unfinished. Concrete walls, exposed beams, utility sink, and old paint cans lining a table. But to the right, there was something else, a second room, locked with a sliding bolt from the outside. That was strange. I snapped some photos and headed back upstairs. Didn't think much of it at the time. Figured maybe someone used it as secure storage. A panic room maybe. But something about how the light died in that basement, I don't know. It sat in my gut wrong. I called in my assistant Danielle that evening and told her to start the paperwork. Then I uploaded the photos to our internal drive and got ready to settle in and type the report. Except when I went back to the drive an hour later, one photo was corrupted. The one of the basement door. Not deleted, just garbled. Lines and static as if taken on a broken camera. I blinked. Tried opening the backup. Also corrupted. Then checked the DSLR card itself. And that version was missing altogether. Only the basement. Everything else remained untouched. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went back to the cabin to try again. I figured maybe there was something magnetic or metallic causing interference inside. Old insulation or wiring maybe. I got there around 10 a.m., fully expecting things to feel more manageable in daylight. But as I stepped through the door, I saw something on the floor. A shoe, just one, women's, white leather, slightly scuffed. It hadn't been there yesterday. Right on the threshold to the stairwell. I walked to the hallway. Light was different. Dimmer, like the back half of the cabin hadn't caught up with the sun yet. I took a breath and forced myself back into the basement. The temperature dropped immediately. My breath misted, even in Arizona summer heat. I approached the locked door again. This time, the bolt was open. I didn't open the door, and no one else had been down there. It was partially ajar. Darkness oozed from the crack, thick and swallowing. I saw nothing inside, no movement, but felt, watched. Not like a regular camera or new feeling. This was deeper, like something in me was being watched. I snapped one photo and bolted. That night, when I uploaded it, same thing. Static, garbled image, but I swear I saw something just faintly behind the distortion. Something tall, slight shoulders, and two reflective dots that might have been eyes. Danielle called me an hour later. She said she found something strange when processing the paperwork. an old file still attached to the lot. A code violation complaint from 2001. It was buried deep in microfilm, not even digitized. She had to request the scan from the county manually. The violation came from a neighbor 3 miles out, dated June 3rd, 2001. Blood seeping from basement, scream heard through the forest. Animal or human unknown. Code enforcement never arrived. Family never reported missing. Case marked closed due to jurisdiction confusion. That night, I deleted everything. Photos, files, coordinates, except one file still shows up in my cloud. I delete it, and it comes back. A picture of the hallway, just above the stairwell. In the center of the frame, something is opening the door at the bottom of the stairs. A pale hand clutches the edge. In every copy of the picture I've tried to delete, the hand is closer to the camera than the last. I stopped checking 5 days ago. I haven't gone back to work since. And at night, in those quiet hours when even the fridge is still, I keep hearing a creak at the top of my own basement stairs, and one single footstep. Some things don't show up when you take a video. You can play it back, frame by frame, and it looks like nothing happened. No movement, no lights, no shapes. But you know what you saw. And worse, you know what you felt. I was 16 the first time I went to the cabin. I'm 31 now, and I still won't go near the woods. Not for camping, not for hiking, not even when I'm desperate to clear my head. I've told this story only once before, and the person I told was dead 2 months later. Heart failure. But he was 27, fit, healthy. Every minute detail of that week in the Pennsylvania woods weighs heavier now that I know he's gone. I hadn't thought about it in years until last week, when I got an anonymous package dropped on my doorstep. Brown paper. No return name. Inside was a flash drive and a sticky note. It said only, "I finally found the footage. It's still in there." I didn't plug it in right away. Something about it made my entire body lock up. Like my DNA remembered before I did. I put it in my desk drawer. That night the dream came back. I was 16 the last time I dreamed about the cabin. Back then, it came every night for 3 weeks straight. The dock, the darkness, something waiting just outside the light. The moment I woke up, all those years ago, it fled. Then for 15 years, nothing. But last week, after that envelope arrived, it came back. Clear as a photograph. The 5 of us had gone up for a weekend. Jesse, Cam, my brother Zach, and Zach's friend Emil. My uncle had passed away suddenly, and my dad told us we had permission to stay at his old fishing cabin before it sold. He hadn't been up there in over a decade, but we were young and stupid and thought off-grid sounded cool. The place wasn't anything special. 1 floor, 2 small bedrooms, no electricity, no plumbing, and a collapsed shed full of rusted tools and broken beer bottles. We rode dirt bikes 40 minutes through deer trails just to reach it. The first 2 nights were normal. Joking, drinking swiped beers, fishing. Jesse kept saying how good the stars looked. And on the second night, someone asked if we were completely alone. Zach said there were no neighbors for miles. If we screamed, he laughed, no one would hear us. We all laughed too, but Kamar's face changed. He said something had followed him when he went to pee behind the trees. We called him paranoid. He was always the dramatic one. Looking back now, I don't think he was scared. I think he was warning us. The third night, everything cracked. Late into the night, our fire was dying, and Emil had gone into the cabin to grab a second blanket. He'd been gone about 15 minutes. Too long. When Jesse said he'd check on him. Then the silence started. It wasn't just the absence of voices. It was everything. No wind, no trees rustling, no crickets, no creaking from the cabin. Just vacuum hush. Even the flames on the campfire looked sluggish, like they were burning underwater. Then we saw Jesse running. He sprinted out of the cabin at full speed, mouth moving, but no sound coming out. His eyes were wet and wide, and behind him, something stepped out of the open door. It looked like Emil at first. Same hoodie, same hair. But when it moved, it stuttered, almost like a puppet on broken strings, limbs bending the wrong way. It stepped out and stopped at the porch, staring at us. Unmoving, Jesse tackled Zach, dragged us all backward. Still no sound. That's when things truly crossed into horror. The thing smiled at us, not Emil's smile. A tooth-wide grin that curled almost to the ears. The kind you see described in books where the mouth goes too far. It walked forward, spasming, changing its posture every few steps. 1 foot normal, one like it was walking on the side, then on its hands, then upright again. Zach threw a rock. It went right through it, like mist. Cam screamed. The noise returned all at once, like a power surge. Wind, bugs, fire crackling, even Emil's voice. But it was wrong, overlapping, glitched. Guys, come look, I found something so cool, like a child doing an impression, or a predator practicing speech. Jesse hauled us into the trees and we ran. We didn't look back until we were a mile from the cabin, sprinting through pitch-black forest with nothing but a fading flashlight and instinct. We slept like animals that night, under a rock ledge about 3 miles downriver. When the sun rose, we snuck back to the site. The cabin was cold, too cold, like the inside of a freezer. And there was no sign of Emil. Footprints only came out the door, none going in. The fire was gone, but the logs remained, unburnt, waterlogged, like they'd sat in a lake overnight. We called the ranger station using a local emergency phone tucked in a ranger's box on the mountain road. Told them our friend went missing during a hike. 2 weeks of searching. Nothing. No one believed us. And none of us ever went back. 15 years, until last week. I finally opened the flash drive. It had one file on it. mlfinal.move. The thumbnail showed the cabin porch. In the video, the 5 of us are sitting around the fire. We're joking, laughing, sipping beers. Emil gets up. Timing lines up exactly with my memory. He walks into the cabin, and then static. Not quick static, prolonged, humming. And when the video returns, it's dark. But the cameras still on the tripod, still rolling. Someone steps into frame. Not Emil. The height is right, but the figure is too thin, neck extended unnaturally long, head slightly sideways and twitching. It walks in slow circles around the fire before looking directly into the lens. It smiles, then raises one hand. In that hand is Emil's backpack. It drops it by the fire pit, steps off into the dark. The video ends. No screams, no chase, no one comes back into frame. But frozen there, in the final 3 seconds, the camera picks up whispering, faint. Dozens of voices layered over each other. One phrase repeated over and over. We never left. I haven't slept in 5 nights. I keep hearing that whisper in corners of my house, in the walls, in passing cars at red lights. I tried calling Jesse, but his number's out of service. My brother hasn't answered texts in 2 weeks. Cam is dead. Found in his car. Engine on, inside a sealed garage. No note, no cause, just burning. The flash drive disappeared after I played it. The drawer I kept it in hasn't closed properly since. Last night, outside my apartment, I thought I saw someone standing under the sodium streetlight, but the light flickered. By the time I got the blinds open again, they were gone. Except the sidewalk had footprints. Wet, human, and small. Like a child's. Just like the ones from the cabin. And tonight, I found something in my mailbox. A note, written in thick crayon. Let's go back and play again.